Hey there. Thank you so much for joining us on the Q Ditch Summit, sponsored by Q and powered by Adobe. My name's Matt Miller. I'm the author of Ditch That Textbook, career high school Spanish teacher. Super excited to get to join you and to be having this conversation that we're having through the summit this summer about teacher wellness. We're talking about those things that we can do to like be our best selves, live our best lives, and be healthy and happy and fulfilled. And it's a super important topic right now. And I've loved seeing all of the different takes that all of the presenters, all of our speakers have had on it. And I'm learning a lot, and I hope that you're learning a lot too. And we're going to continue to learn. And I think this is going to be a super important conversation that we're going to be having. We're going to be talking with Tanya Avrith, who is an education evangelist for Adobe. She's been doing all sorts of things. That's just her most recent jam, which I know that she's super excited about. And I know she's got a lot of really good perspective to share with everybody. So Tanya, can you tell the fine people a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Well, hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for taking your time out of your summer to learn. And I think it's really important that you do that. And this is such a great series on wellness and such an important topic. So my name is Tanya Avrith, as Matt mentioned. I am a career teacher and consultant. And in the last 2 weeks, I am, as Matt mentioned, the new education evangelist at Adobe, which is so exciting and kind of surprising because 3 weeks ago I was teaching high school. I had my class. I was in the classroom just wrapping things up with my students. And so I live in South Florida, originally by way of Montreal, Canada, and just kind of trying to push boundaries and do what's best for kids. And I think that sort of summarizes a little bit about me.
Yeah, absolutely. And isn't that kind of where we all are? We're trying to, or at least I hope anyway, we're trying to push boundaries and do what's best for kids. I love that. I want to get that like put on a poster and put it in my office or something. Push boundaries, do what's best for kids.
That's always what it comes back to. If it's not good for kids, then we shouldn't be doing it.
Yep. So I'm putting this out as a challenge to those of you watching on the summit. Run to Adobe Spark, create us a Spark post that said, what was it again? It was push boundaries, do what's best for kids.
And hashtag create edu, mention me. Oh my God, I'd love to see what you create.
There you go. It'll be fun to see what everybody comes up with. So, all right, cool. Very good. So, Tanya and I, we bounced around several topics that we could chat about here. And, I'm going to give you kind of like the 2-word answer for this. And it's going to kind of seem like, I think the conversation may take a little different turn than you may expect. We finally landed on the idea of personal branding. And I know that sometimes people think that, personal branding is like, I've got my side hustle and I got to be able to market it and I got to be able to do all of that stuff. And, the reality is that, it's a lot different than that. And I think it really does. And when it's done well and when it's done right, it totally ties back into our own well-being. And so I hope that you'll stick with us and be able to see the connections, because we've got some very clear connections that we want to make. So Tanya, let me kick that over to you real quick. Since there is some misconception about this, can you tell us like what your take is on what personal branding is and why it matters?
Absolutely. So this last year, as I mentioned, I taught, I was back in the classroom and I was teaching a class called Personal Branding and Digital Communication. And the name just for at the beginning just didn't sit well with me, because I thought, oh, we're not brands as human beings. We're not selling Coke,
Right.
We're not out there. I'm not, some commercial that's walking around. We are human beings with stories to tell. And so the more I thought about it, the more, as I began teaching the course and working with teachers as well, I started changing the topic so that when we're talking about brand, we're really talking about being able to tell your story, being able to articulate your story, because we all have powerful stories to tell. We all have a why. And that's how I would like to think it. I said, pushing boundaries, and being able to do what's right for kids. That's probably one of my biggest whys. Why do I do this? And so my story that I'm able to tell of why I do this is powerful. And just as every single one of your stories is powerful, it takes you right back to your why. So when you're developing your personal brand, what you're able to do is be able to articulate and share your powerful story. And your story is inspiring and it'll inspire others. And it's this trickle effect that happens when we understand then how to tell it in a compelling way and how to leverage social media and technology in a powerful way, in the right way, right? In the right way to be able to get our stories out.
Yeah. And I want to peel back that onion a little bit. I've got a couple of questions I would love to hear you dive into. First of all, I think I know the answer to this, but I think for the sake of the conversation, I still want to ask it. When we talk about personal branding, is this really all about social media, or is it about more than that?
No, it's definitely about more than that. I mean, when you're talking about your personal brand, it's the way that you represent yourself on a daily basis. It's being able to communicate on a regular basis a little bit more about what you do. I'm still figuring that out myself, right? All the time. And it's always evolving. And I think that people don't realize, like, you don't have to be this one person all the time. You can wear many hats. But as a teacher, my brand is who I am in the classroom. How do I define myself? And I ask my students and I ask teachers that I work with all the time, how do you define yourself? How do you see yourself? And is that the way that you're presenting yourself to others? So does the way you see yourself and the way others see you, does it match? Does it connect? Because very often I think we have an interpretation of the way that we view ourselves, and the way we view ourselves and the way that we're seen can really sometimes disconnect. And so I think sometimes it's important to sort of sit back a little bit and see how you are representing yourself and be able to look at that. And I think it's also very healthy. When I first moved to the US from Canada, and this is going to sound kind of crazy, and it's not meant to be in any way, shape, or form seen in a bad way, but I went to see a therapist because I had an interpretation of the way that I was seeing myself, but the way that I think I was coming off to other people there was a disconnect, because I was used to living in one place, sharing my ideas, being the person I was in Montreal. And when I moved somewhere else, people didn't know who I was. They didn't understand what I was about, and it wasn't always connecting. And so I had to learn, who am I when I move, into this situation? How do I come across? What do I look like when I'm sharing my ideas in different places? So I think that all kind of comes together.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I think whenever it finally does start to come together, and my guess is that it's not a like all on or all off thing, like, oh, I didn't have it. Oh, there it is. Now I've got it. Like, it doesn't just, happen immediately like that. I guess it's kind of like a slow burn, so to speak, like it comes in little by little. And, for you as someone who has wrestled with this and is probably still doing the work of trying to pin it down. I mean, maybe you've taken it from way back here and you're getting it a little more in focus. So maybe it's more in focus than it was before. But for you, having gone through some of that process, I would love to ask you, what has it done for you? And what do you think it can do for people whenever you start to take that focus and you start to figure out what your why is, like what you're really all about?
Such a good question, Matt. I did not have a lot of clarity moving when I first moved. I felt like I had lost my why. So this was 5 years ago when I moved from Montreal to Florida. And I went through this transitional period of, okay, now I'm in a new place. I felt like I had lost my why, because I had worked at a district for so long. I was shifting now into a new role as consultant. My children were in new schools. I was in a different country. It was very different. And for a long time, I went into this very dark, negative space because I felt misunderstood. I didn't feel whole. And I had began to sort of lose a bit of my identity. And so for a while I suffered with that. I mean, we talk about wellness and, you know, and depression and I was in between my places. I wasn't working with kids, which was really hard as well. So I was feeling kind of lost. And what really helped guide me back, first of all, was really good friends. I have a really awesome PLN, a group of amazing teachers. One in particular is this teacher. His name is Kyle Wagner, and he actually teaches in Hong Kong, and he's incredible. And he kind of sat me down and was like, Tanya, I got to help you. And he helped me sort of vision back. So we created literally vision board, like vision back. Where do you see yourself? What do you want to do? Who do you want to be? What are your goals? What my why was? Why am I doing all this? Who, oh Matt, you make me cry. You know, who do I want to, how do I want to come off, and what are my goals? Because I felt so lost. And that's when things started working, when I started making those affirmations, like, okay, I'm going to do this. I also speak a lot with Lisa Dabbs. I don't know if you know Lisa. Yeah, and Lisa's like my soul sister. She's Teach with Soul. That's literally who she is on Twitter. And she's just one of those people that is able to really just sort of help guide. She's a mentor. She is New Teacher Chat. I mean, she is the mentor, and she's mentored me for years. And for a while I would call her, and she would also help me kind of redirect the things that were important. Mm-hmm. She did such a good job. And she's just so positive. When I was thinking about when this opportunity arose at first to come to Adobe, at first I was like, I can't do this. I was terrified of leaving my family, of what that would do for my children, of everything. And you know, just to be able to say, like, well, let's go back to your why, right? What is it that you want to do? Well, for me, what I want to do is be able to do what's right for kids, to be able to reach as many kids as possible. That is my why. That is my genuine why. And I thought, she said, well, here you're going to have a platform to be able to reach all these kids and all these teachers in a way that you might not have ever had. You got to be able to do that. And so I'm not an expert. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not somebody that can say that I have all this experience, but my personal story, my journey, what it has taken me is from a place where I was lost, where I was trying to find myself, to a place where now I feel like I have direction and goals. And the truth is, it's really not that much of a secret. It's just being able to put yourself out there, to continue to have those goals, and to find your story and your why.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I've gone through that myself, you know, and it's kind of evolved, and I think it's okay to have a different why at different phases of your life, you know, in different times of your life. And I know I've gone through, you know, a variety of different ones, and yeah, no, this is so good. So I wanted to loop back. Yeah, you said that you talked to this friend of yours. What was his name again?
Kyle Wagner.
Kyle, that's right. Yeah. And so he helped you kind of work through all of that. Like, where do you see yourself? Where do you want to be? What are your goals? And first of all, if you've got a friend who's willing to sit with you and help you think through that and not have to think through it on your own, I think anybody who has a friend like that is blessed. And I wondered, you know, in that case, you got somebody else's perspective in on it. And you keep talking about how, like, how do you see yourself? And sometimes it's hard to see yourself. I heard somebody say, and I've heard this attributed to many different people, so I'm not even but I'm just gonna say this wasn't me. Somebody once said, it's hard to read the label when you're inside of the jar.
That's so true.
You know?
It's true.
And so if you can't read the label when you're inside of the jar, sometimes you need somebody else to help you read the label. And, you know, in that case, that's what Kyle, I think, was able to do to you, or not, or for you, with you. And so, yeah, I wondered if you just wanted to touch on that, about how it might be important to have other people help you to be able to see that.
Absolutely. He saw me sort of going into like a very slippery slope, because it's very easy to get bogged down, or to feel sorry for yourself, or that negative energy is toxic. and it starts to take over. And I've been there. I've met people, recently, like friends of mine that are now in that place where you kind of, when you're in a bad place and one thing goes wrong and then another thing, and then it feels like the whole world and the whole weight of the world is sitting on you. And I mean, I was going through depression. I was really not in a good, happy place. And he could see that. And when he was able to say to me, Tanya, I have an idea. I have a solution. Not that it solved all my problems. I was, seeing somebody and I was kind of going through that journey. But he said, I have something that I think is going to really help put things in perspective. Because it's also about, what we also did is we looked at what I had to be grateful for. Right. And I know when we just met earlier before we started speaking, and you said, how are you doing? And I said, I feel so blessed.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not just because I'm in this position that I'm in now, but because I feel so blessed because I have clean water and I have food on the table, and I have a family that loves me and that I love, and that I live in a place where I'm so blessed to have a home. And I'm happy for those reasons. All the other things are kind of like the cherry on the top of the cake, right?
Yes.
Those add-ons. I was happy last year in the classroom. I had no problem. I would have stayed there until I retired, and then I would have volunteered because that's where my heart and soul is. And I would have stayed there because that's where I am at my best and where I love to be. And so all the things that have come from all these different places, I think have come from a place where I've felt at ease with where I am.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I'm totally with you on that. So let's kind of, there's another direction I'm hoping that we can take this too. Cause I know that, if we're kind of tying this back to our, our main focus of, what we're calling personal branding. I know that part of that, and I asked you earlier, does this really all about social media? And of course the answer is no, it's about your why. And I wanted to hear real quick before we go, I'm all over the place today. One thing that you said earlier that I circled on my notes big time is, how do you see yourself? And is it what you're projecting? I just wanted to highlight that again. How do you see yourself? Is it what you're projecting? That's another one I want to get put up on a poster and like put in my office, in my house, and wherever. But one big part of this whole thing is your digital life too. It's so interesting. I've recorded these interviews in probably a different order than what they're going to be displayed in. So if you're watching this and you're hearing this, forgive me if we haven't gotten there yet, or if we have already gotten there yet. But Tanya's about number I think 6 or 7 out of all of the recordings. And in all of the recordings that I've done to this point today, the conversation keeps coming back around to our digital lives. I don't even know if that term is very accurate. It makes a whole lot of sense, but just the simple fact that we have these supercomputers that we carry around in our pockets that connect us to people, I feel like mine is it almost feels like a digital leash sometimes. And it's something that it's still so new in the history of the world and the history of, modern society. It's still so new. And I think we're all still trying to make sense of it. And I think obviously it plays very much into this idea of personal branding and teacher wellness. And it just seems like such a fit to what we're talking about. So I wondered if, and I know Tanya, you've had you've got some personal stories related to all of this. And I'd love to just kind of get your take on all of that.
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, this year, it's kind of like the world aligned, and I taught a class on personal branding and digital communication. And so people are like, what is that? Well, first of all, it was a mandatory class for every single student to take in order to graduate. And which is very odd. Most schools don't have a class like that. And so when people would come in and they'd say like, well, what is this? basically the premise of the class is one day you're going to be Googled, not if, but when. And are you going to be able to own your digital identity in a way where you are telling your own story? And if that's the case, do you know how to do it in a way where it is beautiful, where it is aesthetic? Do you have the digital skills, the fluency and the literacy to understand how to do it in a way that's, meaningful, that you can connect it to an authentic audience? And so very often I would say that, and the teachers in the school would come and see me and say, I need this class.
Yeah.
I need this class, right? Because I'm teaching it to students, but for the most part, so many of us, I don't know if you've seen the comedy act. I can't remember her right now, but it's on Netflix. It's called Elder Millennial. It's hilarious, and I would joke. It's so funny. It's really hilarious. I wish I knew her name right now, but it's Elder Millennial, and I'm an elder millennial. I was born in '82. I'm just at the cutoff. 81 is like kind of the beginning of the millennials. And I would joke because I can still relate to other, those who are, the Gen Xers, right? But I can also remember the time when the shift began to happen. And so I think that I'm unique in just in terms of like when we talk about, Malcolm Gladwell and outliers, and just like in terms of like when you're born and when things happen, there's some things that are not by accident. They're intentional because of where you are placed. And I think that has created that outlier for me to be able to be that perfect fit to bridge that gap. And so I can understand the kids' lives because they don't see this digital, non-digital. They're just like, they're on and that's their life because they don't know any better. That's all they've ever known. Whereas as adults, we have this disconnect and we're starting to grapple and understand and really understand their world versus our world. And how do we make sense of that? How do we balance that? Right? And how do we get ourselves out there without, being branded and coming off as kind of over the top? And how do you do it in a way that's not kind of yucky, that doesn't come off in a yucky way?
Yeah.
I mean, Matt, I think you do a really good job at that, because I'm going to put it back in you. I don't know if anyone, ever said this to you, but I think that there's, you have a brand. You're a digital textbook, Matt Miller. People know who you are, but you're so genuine and kind, and you don't do it in a way where I would ever feel like, ugh, right? And there's that balance of like give and take of like how you put yourself out there versus, and versus like how you're balanced in your life. And then as teachers, we're also balancing so much more. Like this year, I was telling you earlier, I went back to the classroom after I hadn't been in the classroom for about 4 years. Okay. And maybe more, maybe even 5 years. Like, and in my own classroom, it had been 8 because I had been supporting as an itinerant teacher at the school district. So I was in schools, but I was working with other teachers. And I thought, I wrote the Google Infused Classroom. I'm a speaker. I've been supporting schools. I've been doing organizational development. I've done all these things. And I was like, oh, this is fine. I'll be fine. I got this. I'm teaching this class. I'm going to be okay. By the end of the first trimester, I was also putting together the TEDx. I was running the TEDx. I was teaching the new class. I was making connections with my students. I was trying to balance my life. I was so sick. I was mentally and physically so sick, and also like mentally, like in the sense that I felt like a complete failure. And I don't talk about this very often, but because it was a really rough year in the sense that like I got this, right? And the reality was like, and it was so good because I think it really it balanced me, but also connected me much more to what what I'm going to be doing in my next role, because I felt a lot more empathy about, I guess you kind of forget after a while when you're out of the classroom, like,
right.
And also the kids are so different than what I had remembered. They really truly were so different than the kids that I had taught, 8 years before in my own class. And so I had to really reframe my life and reframe how I saw myself again, re-understanding my my personal story and how I was, how I was able to get my class going and how I was able to balance my life. And so many of you, I'm sure, are going through the same thing who are watching this, where you watch all these people who are these speakers on, at ISTE. We just came back from ISTE. I sat next to a friend of mine from Montreal on the plane, and she's a 5th grade teacher. Her name is Daphne. And she's like, I went to this session in this teacher librarian. She handed me all these resources. And I was like, there's no way she is teaching. There's no way she's doing this full time. I could not do all these things. And she's absolutely right. I don't know who this person was, unless she's a superstar, because when you're back in the classroom and that is your job, you can't do it all. Even the thing, I wrote the book, the Google, I couldn't do 70% of the stuff that I said I wanted to do. I felt like a complete failure. I just thought I was the worst teacher for the first 3 months. And it caused me so much anguish that I actually got physically sick from it. I was diagnosed in November, which is just right at the beginning, with ulcerative colitis. And so I was literally made myself physically sick coming back this year.
Yeah.
And not to complain about it. I'm the happiest place in my life, but I had to understand my life. I had to rethink what I was capable of doing and what the realities of the classroom, because being a teacher is the hardest job. It is so hard. I mean, I know what we do as educators. We give not just our curriculum and and forget it. We give our heart and our soul to our kids, right? When I'm with my students, I want them to feel like they're the most important human being on the planet. And that requires so much of myself that you forget to take care of who you are. And I think I wanted to say this, and I think that this is all part of that story. Is like, you see all these things that are happening online, you see all that digital stuff going on, but in the reality is, very often, a lot of these people are not necessarily classroom teachers, or they're part-time, or they have a team, or they've been doing it for many, 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 many years. So I wanted to say to teachers, and I've been wanting to say, I'm so glad that, Matt, you've given me this platform, because this has been on my mind.
Yeah.
Is that you have to be good to yourself, and you need to take it one hyperdoc at a time.
I love that.
But it's true, one hyperdoc at a time. And then next year it's going to get a little better, and then get connected, because I reached out to, I'm blessed. I'm friends with Lisa Heifel and Holly Clark and Matt Miller. And, these are my friends, right? I mean, but they're only a tweet away, and I was able to connect. And it really helped me feel better when I was able to start realizing, like, all the advice that I always said, I was like not doing, one hyperdoc at a time. And when I started doing that, one hyperdoc at a time, and believe me, those take time to make. They weren't so good at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
It started getting a little bit better.
Yeah, definitely. What you were just talking about there reminds me of, there's a book that I'm reading right now. I just got back from the ISTE conference, which is in Philadelphia, and I was at the Franklin Institute, which is a big museum, like a sort of a STEM based, kind of like sciencey museum. And there's a book that I picked up there, and it was about all of the astronauts that had walked on the moon, and they gathered all of these lessons from all of their space exploration. And one of the things that they touched on was how they handled things that were going wrong. For instance, you're in space flight, or even more, you're in the simulator, because they spent, thousands of hours in the simulator before they actually took off. And whenever everything is going crazy around you, they had sort of this step-by-step process that they would take to try to get through the hard times. And what you were talking about reminds me so much of it. Actually, I just saw myself in the video, and I just remembered that I had this on. This is from the Apollo 13, the Apollo 13 mission. It says, failure is not an option. This was like, there are people up in space right now. We cannot fail. We cannot let them go. And so what they would do, and they said Navy SEALs are trained to do this. There's like all sorts of people in military and all walks of life that are trained to do this. They said, first of all, you have to disconnect yourself from the narrative in your head, all the voices in your head that are telling you, I can't do this, I'm scared, what are people going to think of me? They said you have to focus on the task at hand. Then you have to think about what is the very next step. Here I am. This is the very next step. And then what are the options I can take on that step? And I thought, man, that's just like, it's so simple, but it's so empowering, or at least it was to me, because first of all, it blocks out all of that noise. You get all that noise in your head of, I'm not good enough. What are people going to think of me? Oh, this is bad. This is horrible. This is, whenever I get up and speak in front of people, I start to get that. And it's like, I start to monitor myself and I start to think about what are they thinking? Is this relevant? Is this, are they rolling their eyes at me inside? And when I start to do that, then my brain shuts off or at least it diverts from what I'm trying to do. And I think I've got to block all of that out because it doesn't help me right now.
Yeah.
It can't do any good right now. Right now, I have a job to do, and that is to deliver this message. In their case, it was to land this lunar module.
Yeah.
And then the next thing is focus on the very next step and then think about what are all of the possible options. And what you were talking about there, it brought me back to that so much because it's so easy to let ourselves get off on all of those things. And when we get back to the core of it, then we can, it kind of empowers us to make better decisions, I think.
Oh, totally. Thinking about it in terms of one, and I should have known that, because when I first,
me too.
right? Like, you should know that it should be, it should be instinctual, because we tell that to our kids, we tell it to our students, and we become so hard on ourselves. And I think it's because we think that all these other things are happening around us. And we think that all these other people are able to do it, because the truth is, like, when people are sharing online, they're sharing all the wins and not the 99 times that it sucked.
That's true.
Right?
It is. Yeah.
They're on Instagram. It's like, you go on Instagram, you share the best picture, you take 20, you put the best one on there, right?
Yep.
That's not the reality of what's really happening. And we're all human. We're all making these mistakes, and so that comes back to that digital piece, that whole idea of that brand, because that brand is evolving. It is not concrete and stuck. And if we wanted to relate it to companies, if companies were concrete and stuck, they would never innovate. They would just fall apart. Right? I work for a company that is all based on creativity. I work at Adobe, and I'm learning about the culture, and the culture is about, being genuine and creating and innovating. I mean, that's a big part of the value of where I'm at. And you have to think, like, I'm going to continue, and I'm going to keep on pushing, and I'm going to evolve, but I'm willing to put my story out there and share that, and maybe be a little vulnerable at times, because ultimately, what do we want to do? We want to help each other. No one goes into education because they don't want to make a difference in the world. Like, then you're in the wrong place. And so I think that it's okay. Like, if you're at home and you've been feeling like, you seeing all these things, and that's why I wanted to talk about it, branding, because I think that people want to get out there and do all these things. But I think it's really important that they understand that the brand is about your story, and your story has so many layers and so many facets. And so you need to be okay with the fact that if you're not there yet, or or maybe you're not even comfortable putting your story out there, but maybe you want to share it with your students and let them understand who they are, and maybe let them share their story.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe you don't want to put it out, but maybe it's helpful for them to, and to give them the opportunity to do it. But that idea of that story, I think, is so important.
Yeah. Oh, I think so too. It comes back to, the thing that I keep hearing you say is, if it's really about your why, it's like who you are and why you hope to exist in this world, then, the way that you project that to people, it's the way that it's our opportunity to influence people. And I feel like that's such a big, yeah. And if that isn't there, then, my friend Jed has this quote that he, and I'm going to probably butcher this quote trying to remember it from memory, but I've seen it so much, I feel like I've kind of got it. He says, the quote is something to the effect of, if I, go about this world and I don't leave my mark, then what was I here for? And I think when you've got that brand, when you've got that why, and you kind of know what you're all about, that's a big part of it. But that also, I think, it doesn't mean that we can't experiment with other parts of it. It's kind of like this living, growing, adapting, changing thing, isn't it? Like, just because you've decided, like, oh, 2 years ago, I had this, like, I went off into the woods and I meditated on my why, and I came back and I was enlightened, and now I have my why, and oh, but I really want to, like, think about this, and this is kind of important to me now, but oh no, sorry, this is like right, what you see right here, this is my why. You can still bring those other things in, can't you? It's constantly evolving.
I mean, I use Dean Shareski all the time in my brain.
Oh, I love Dean. Yeah.
And you follow him. I think I remember the first time I followed him, I got an automatic DM that said, if you're following me, I want you to know a little bit about me. I don't just tweet about education. I might talk about golf and my granddaughter or something along those lines. Like, and my, but like, this is who I am. This is how I use this. And if you're following me and you like that, then that's awesome. And like, I'd like to think like, when I'm posting, I'm a human being. Like, that's just kind of like figuring it all out. I don't really know very often what I'm doing at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You and me both.
And I'm doing the right choices because I want to do what's best. And I think that if you have that intention and you are creating and you are making and you are putting yourself out there, and then you're on the right track. I guess I want to say to you watching, take a risk, share your story. It's powerful. You're doing awesome things and feel powerful. Don't feel like you're not. Even if you feel that way, we've all been there. Believe me, we've all been there.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. Now, when it comes to that, this is another side of all of that I wanted to touch on a little bit. When it comes to that, putting yourself out there can be emotionally taxing.
Yeah.
It's hard to say, it makes me think of the Greatest Showman, the song, This Is Me, I am brave, I am bruised, I am who I'm meant to be. And that sometimes people don't see you for that, and sometimes, or maybe they will, but we have this fear in our minds that they won't. And trying to overcome fear is emotionally taxing, and it's a lot. And to be able to put yourself out there is good, but also to be able to scale it back, to be able to tone it back, and to make sure, this is another one of those topics that keeps coming up in these conversations, is about balance, about, there are seasons for all of it. Sometimes we go and we're, pushing things out, and we're pushing our story out, and we want to be able to tell and to give and give and give. But then at some point we come back over here and we go, okay, now I need to recharge. I need to reflect. And there really is, I think, and Tanya, I'd love to hear your take on this too. I think there is a great balance between the give, but the outward, the output, but I think there's also got to be a lot of input, listening and reflecting. And I think if we do too much of either one, then we're out of balance, and we're kind of almost doing the world a disservice.
Absolutely.
If we stay over here in input land and we consume, and we think and we think and we think, and we don't do anything about it, you can't affect the world. You can't change the world that way. But then if you're over here and you're like, talk, push, and we've seen plenty of those folks before. We see them on social media. We see them at conferences sometimes. And we think, it's like, sometimes I go, if we had a scale, if we had a pie chart, and I had to look at the percentage of the time that you spend outputting and the percentage of time that you spend inputting, you would be way out of whack, And so there, you've got to find that balance, right?
I think you're absolutely right. And I actually teach this in my class, the importance of digital balance. I actually have a lesson called, and I'm going to have to give Rebecca Hare credit for this, because when I was freaking out about this lesson. She actually helped me. She said, again, my friends helped me, but she helped me come up with this idea. And I created a social media campaign called, and you'll find if you go #GoingBeyondTheLike, you'll see my students' work, because I had them create and a post, and then they had to share it on Twitter. And it's all about the importance of literally that, being balanced, understanding that that sometimes it's okay to disconnect and to shut down, and but to also understand that there's human beings on the other end of that device, that you need to still make the connection, that sometimes it's better to know when to call somebody. We need to sort of calculate that balance in terms of how much we are online, putting out, connecting, and then balancing that with making those human connections that are so, so, so important. And I think as an adult, I'm also grappling that. Now I'm back home working, and I'm sure, Matt, you must have to do this as well, because I think, like, I have to figure out, well, when is it that I'm working and when is it that I'm a mom or a wife?
Yeah.
Right. And so setting those boundaries at home in terms of that balance, of when too much is too much. And now I have a daughter who's going into middle school.
Oh, I remember it. I just went through that a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, she doesn't yet have a phone. She's like the only one.
Yeah, my kids are singing the same song, let me tell you.
And I'm like that mom who knows too much.
Yep.
I talk so much about being on, and doesn't want my kids to have a phone yet. Who does, who's trying to just push it a little, because she's 11 and I figured the age is 13. So I'm still in that mentality, like that I want her to have that balance. I want her to go outside and play outside. I want her to feel the wind on her cheeks and get on her bicycle. And because I know that I can become too much on it, right? Just like all of us.
Yep.
So I set up boundaries. I turn things off. I leave the phone downstairs. I have my daughter's iPad and son's iPad sleeping in my room every night, because I've been doing that since she's 5 years old. So that when she's in high school, she knows she doesn't sleep with it at home, because she needs that to turn it off. That's, when all the bad stuff happens at school is at night when no one's watching, right? So all that is stuff that we're still working at. We're trying to figure out that balance of, so when I say put your story out, it doesn't necessarily mean like you have to be online all the time.
Right.
It really doesn't. And that's not how I meant it. I meant it just to be able to communicate that story.
Yes. Yeah. And I did. Yeah. And I didn't pick it up that way either. And I think that, it's like I was mentioning earlier, this whole internet age and cell phone age and everything is still so new. I keep mentioning, forgive me if you're watching these videos and you've seen several of them and you hear me talking about digital minimalism again, because, or is that what it's, yeah. It's this book by Cal Newport. We've talked about it a couple times in some of the videos. If you haven't heard it yet, brace yourself. It's coming. But he talks about this very thing about the impact that our phones have on us, and whenever it's always on. And he talks about how you can, just the power of all of that. Oh no. Okay. All that I've just said there for the last 15 seconds, I was really like spinning my wheels trying to remember what I was trying to come back to. And now it's gone again. Doggone it. This is real stuff here, folks. This is like, this is how you can tell that it's a real conversation. I just lost my train of thought and I'm owning it. Okay.
I love it. That happens to me way too much than I'd like to admit it. So it's fine.
Yeah. Gosh. Okay.
But digital minimalism, I can just imagine.
Yeah.
Because that's definitely, I'm seeing a lot more of that pop up on social media, because we all recognize that we're sometimes just too connected, and we need to just disconnect and look a human being in the eye, look up and just feel that connection.
Yeah.
Like these That's why, I mean, ISTE, as we mentioned, we just came back, and that's what I love about ISTE are the conversations, are the ability to go for lunch with someone that you share all these things on social media, but then meet them in real life and be able to build a memory, to be able to touch the person's, to hand, to
Yes.
know who they
Yes.
are, to build a memory that's physical, right? That's real.
Yeah.
And I think that there's something to be said about that. And not everyone gets to go to ISTE. I mean, it's expensive and it's far. And that's why things like this, or being able to create your own personal network at home with your teachers in your school, or teachers in your neighborhood, that stuff is so powerful when you're able to do that. It's just so refreshing. It makes you feel so human again.
Yeah. Yeah, totally agree. Thank you for saving me on that, by the way. The thought never totally came back. Maybe it'll show up in another video. I've still got a couple interviews to do at this point, so maybe it'll still show up. Yeah.
My grandma used to say it must have been a lie, but
maybe, I don't know. Maybe it was. Yeah. So real quick, as we're wrapping up here, since this does sort of tie into personal branding, one of the big tools that you work with in your position is Adobe Spark. And it is a really good way to help you to tell your story and to let people know what you stand for and everything. So I wondered if you could tell folks just a little bit about what that is and how it can tie into the kinds of things that we're talking about.
Absolutely. I mean, the whole Creative Cloud in general is all about being able to tell compelling stories, right? To create your stories. Spark is one element of Adobe's amazing creative tools. And what's really awesome about it is it's so simple to use, but it creates such complex creations. And what it is a set of tools. There's Post, which is a graphic tool, Spark Video, which allows you to create really beautiful, easy to create videos where students are making their thinking visible. It's incredible. And Pages, which is kind of like a gliding web page, but it's absolutely stunning. And my students create their personal narratives in there, and they do all kinds of cool stuff. And so it's free for K-12. You just would have to go to spark.adobe.com/edu. It's set up through enterprise. So it would have to be set up through your school's administrator, your IT administrator. But once it's set up, it's single sign-in. You can use it with Microsoft sign-in. You can use it with Google sign-in. It's fantastic. It's super, super dynamic. And basically, it's allowing your students to create those compelling stories in a really simple way. And with the enterprise version, there's actually a branding feature that is free. So I had kids creating the look and feel of their work. So when they were creating, they used their brand. They had a logo, they design. And so they were starting to really create work that told their story and visually in a way that they were really proud of. And there's just to be said about that. And so so it's just, I mean, this is the joy of what I get to do, is like, I get to share these really great stories, but I also get to share with you these really great tools that are, I mean, I say it like, it's like, I think that what Adobe's doing with Spark is what Google for, what Adobe is doing with Spark for creation is what Google did for collaboration. And I think that that's, and what we just, now we have Project Share, and so you can share, and we're moving more towards collaboration. So this tool is like unbelievable what kids are going to be able to create, those demonstrations of learning, those artifacts of learning. It's just powerful. And so, I'm so excited, like, check it out. If you haven't, oh my goodness, you won't be sorry. I promise you that.
Yes, totally. Yeah, no, I totally agree. I'm blown away whenever I see teachers creating on it, when I see students creating on it, of what they can do with it. It is really, really impressive. And of course, the price point is like perfect. I always like to joke, what's a teacher's favorite price? What do you think it is, Tanya? Free. Exactly. It's free. So, we totally love that.
And it's a good it's an entryway to the next parts, right? You're teaching them about creation, you're teaching them those literacies, that fluency. And as they get into the, higher levels, that's when you start incorporating all these other tools. But to start, this is such a great place to start.
Yes. No, I totally agree. I think, Tanya, I could probably sit here and talk to you about all of the things, all of this stuff for hours and hours and hours, but we won't we won't put the folks that are watching through all of that. Although if you are watching this and you get a chance to sit down and talk to Tanya, I know that you'll feel exactly the same that I do. I know that you've been, she's given me the heart. I know you can't see it, but she was. If folks have seen this and they're like, I love this, I need more. If they want to be connected with you in any ways, what are the best ways to do it?
Definitely Twitter is probably the number one. It's still for me the best way. And if you would like to reach out to me personally, you can email me avrith@adobe.com. I have a blog, which is going to start getting a little bit busier since I'm no longer creating Hyperdoc after Hyperdoc.
Yeah.
And grading and working with all my kids. So I'll have a little more time to start posting and sharing things that I'm doing. And you can also follow me on Instagram at Tanya Avrith. So I would love to see your sparks. Please connect with me at Tanya Avrith on Twitter. Please, 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 because I would love to see what you're creating.
Yes, yes, and me too. I'm really interested to see this. We'll have, of course, the Ditch Summit hashtag going during all of this. So anything that you're creating, anything that you're sharing,
Tanya Avrith, Matt Miller, let's do it. I want to see what you're sharing.
Yes, yes, totally, totally. So, so anyway, Tanya, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me on. And thank you to every single one of you who have taken your time out of your busy summer. You teachers are amazing. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes, I totally agree. And thank you so much for watching, for being a part of the Ditch Summit, sponsored by Q, powered by Adobe. Hope you're loving the videos. We will see you on the next one. Thanks.